It's all about the people. If you've got good people and you develop them and you treat them fairly and you reward them well, you've got the ingredients to go places. I think I specialised too narrowly, but I think you need to be a bit more rounded. Given where I went in law into management, a bit of a broader knowledge of other disciplines would have helped me.
Right, Peter, thanks very much for joining me.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
Excellent. Well, look, just start off, it'd be great if you give a bit of introduction into yourself and your career as well.
Yep, okay. So, Peter Jackson, Scouser, born and bred in Liverpool. Went to St Edward's College in West Derby in Liverpool, grammar school boy of the 70s, Catholic grammar school boy. Was good at passing exams, so got into Oxford. I didn't get there because I'm the greatest intellectual in the world, or the greatest academic, I can assure you. And did a law degree, or jurisprudence, as we called it in those days. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with English, history and French A-levels, but a really good friend of mine, a close family friend, had the same sort of background, went into law and told me about it, and it seemed interesting.
Yeah.
So did that. Second year at university, as was the way in those days, I think it still is, was encouraged to think about how to make some money out of this law degree thing. Didn't believe I was quick enough on my feet to go to the bar at the time. I didn't feel I had that ability to command an audience in a courtroom. So I went down the solicitor route and applied to a number of firms. Was successful in getting into Hill Dickinson and Co, as it then was. Did a couple of summer placements in the early 80s and started on the 1st of September 1983.
Nice. And here we are.
And here we are, 40 odd years later.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Right. So you mentioned early education in Liverpool.
Yeah.
So let's start from the very beginning then. Brought up in Liverpool, went to a grammar school, got into Oxford.
Yeah.
You mentioned you had similar people around you, role models or mentors that did a similar thing. I mean, how much of a well-trodden path was that to go from a grammar school in Liverpool to Oxford?
It was all right. Yeah, it was. I'm going to say, was it normal? Well, it certainly wasn't novel, let's put it that way. So, for example, in my year at St Eddie's, I think it was 8 or 9 of us got into Oxford or Cambridge, and that was not unusual. Yeah. And it was the same at schools the likes of Bluecoat, St Mary's, Crosby, similar schools like that at the time. So, no, it wasn't novel. And that continued because several of people who later became colleagues who were younger than me went through a similar route. Yeah. So, yeah, it was, I won't say well-trodden path, but the path was open.
9 or 10 is good. 9 or 10 going to Oxford is good. Yeah. So you talk yourself down there, you say it's a non-academic background for yourself. No, I don't believe I'm talking myself down because I had no knowledge of the law at that stage at all. I'd got decent O-levels and decent A-levels, but I wasn't the genius in the classroom. Yeah. But I don't think you necessarily need to be to go into law, and then it's what you make of it. Yeah. And that I don't think that's being harsh on myself. I think that's realistic assessment of my abilities at the time. Yeah, fair enough. So you mentioned that you had, did you say a family member or someone close to you doing that? It
was someone close to me, a guy who was a couple of years older than me, who our families knew each other well. He'd been to St Edward's as well. Yeah. He was at Exeter College, actually, where I ended up going, and that's purely by chance, in the sense that I applied there, but I had to apply to other colleges as well. Of course. And he gave me a bit of an insight into what the law was, because, as I say, I had no real knowledge, save that my dad had been a policeman, but I didn't fancy doing criminal law, to be honest. But he gave me that insight that led me to believe I would enjoy it, and I think that's very important, but also that it was going to be interesting. Yeah. And so that's why I followed that route.
I think that's important, actually. I think most people, for certainly my generation, they have experience of maybe TV shows or whatever it may be about what life is like as a lawyer. I think the reality is very different. So if you have someone around you a mentor or someone with that experience, it definitely helps to get a better idea of what that actually looks like.
Yeah, I agree. Don't forget, this was 40 years ago plus.
Yeah.
This generation, your generation, has advantages in terms of the availability of information and knowledge that we didn't have.
Definitely.
So, for example, if I hadn't had Steve, my mate, I probably would have had very little opportunity to learn about the reality of doing a law degree. If I hadn't known somebody at Hill Dickinson and Co. through a friend of a friend and been able to get a couple of summers, we never called it internship in those days, it was summer placement or whatever, I wouldn't have had that insight to what it's really like in a law firm.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily suggest everybody relies on Suits or LA law, because it is a bit different. Or indeed the new Kardashian divorce one that's come out, which apparently is terrible. But
well, I'm glad to say I haven't seen it yet.
No, neither have I. But seriously, there's far more information now for someone who is thinking about going into law and might not necessarily have a family background that gives them that insight.
Yeah.
To learn what it can be like, to learn that it is difficult. I mean, it's not an easy career to go into at all. And to get a feel for what it is like around the practicalities of being a lawyer, whether that's a practicing solicitor, a barrister, or any of the other routes that you can go down these days.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you mentioned there. I mean, especially when I was at university, the only people who came to uni were law firms. It was all private practice.
Yeah.
No barristers came, no one from in-house. To be honest, I didn't actually know that was an option, that you could go and work in a bank or now it's probably more tech companies, I guess. But yeah, I didn't realise that was an option, but there's definitely more awareness around that now. Yeah,
very, very much so. And I think you mentioned Barristers' Chambers not doing it. I don't think they did it in my day, but they do it now because it's a war for talent. And, every branch of the profession, be it, solicitors, barristers, in-house, whatever it may be, is looking to attract, the next generation of the top talent in their space. And it's a seller's market.
Yeah.
And you've got to go out. And yes, it is difficult to get training contracts. I accept that. And, as I said earlier, it's not easy, but there are many more routes to go down. And as we said earlier, there's many more ways of finding out what those routes really look like and whether they're going to suit you. Insofar as you can tell at the age of 20-odd or whatever it may be. I mean, good Lord.
Yeah.
Your perceptions of life can change significantly, can't they, very quickly at that age. But at least you get that initial starting point that thinks, I might go for this. This could be okay, which I don't think you necessarily got in my generation. It was a bit more of potluck. Yeah,
okay. So when you went to Oxford for the first time, I imagine it's very different from life in Liverpool. Was there a moment when you're kind of walking around, maybe the first semester, you just thought, wow, I can't believe I'm here? Was it a surreal experience? Or?
It was a bit surreal to start with. It was very different, obviously, coming from Liverpool. I very nearly packed it in towards the end of the first term. Yeah, I just thought maybe this isn't for me after all. But
was that workload? I mean, what was feeding into that?
I was homesick.
Yeah,
I'd never been away from home before. I went, and it was more the case that this happened in my day. There's no gap years or any of that nonsense. Good Lord, you got your A-levels, you went to university, or you started work because you had to, and that was the end of it. You might have done a bit of grape picking in France in that summer between starting. Or when one or two of the lads I knew did the shutdown sweeping in Fords in Speke.
Right.
But you didn't go on the Southeast Asia trail that you guys all did, and my sons seem to spend a lifetime doing. None of that was available. So, it was really a case of leaving mum and dad, waving goodbye, going off to the brave world of university. And, of course, you're going to Oxford, which is a very, very different environment for somebody from a provincial urban background like mine. Yeah. And I think I struggled with that for a few weeks or so. But I came to terms with it relatively quickly because terms at Oxford are only 8 weeks, and you know, by Christmas in that first year, I was very comfortable, and had no second thoughts at all at that point, and fitted in. And I think I found people with very similar backgrounds to mine, although very diverse in terms of where they came from and how they got there.
Yeah.
And that was comforting. That was helpful at the time. You know, if I hadn't found that, then I was with a type of individual, and I'm not being critical or judgmental at all, but just so different to my background that I think I would have struggled for a lot longer.
Yeah. Well, on that point, I did a bit of research before I came today, and in 1981, it was less than 50% admissions to Oxford. That number in 2024 is now 66.2%.
From
state schools,
schools now,
non-fee paying schools to
yeah.
Oxford, not Oxbridge, Oxford.
Yeah.
So it is getting better.
It's getting better, not enough, but it's getting better. Yeah.
Well, if you look at the breakdown of how many people go to Eton or whatever school it may be versus the amount of attendees to Oxbridge, it's obviously very disproportionately weighted.
Yeah.
But at least that number's moving in the right direction.
No, well, that's good to hear. Yeah, definitely.
So we've delved a little bit into your a bit of your early life, a bit of your education. Let's move on to your early career days then. So graduated, I'm assuming you graduated from Oxford.
I did. I did get there in the end. Yeah.
Graduated from Oxford. The next step then is LPC. So I know it's changed now.
I don't think we called it LPC in those days. Whatever we called it. I did a year at Christleton College of Law.
Right.
And with a law degree, I only had to do 1 year.
Yeah. Where is Christleton, sorry?
Christleton's just outside Chester.
Okay.
Then there were only, and anyone listening to this may correct me, but I think there were only 3 or 4 venues you could go to that were run by the College of Law.
Yeah.
I think 2 or 3 were outside London. Fortunately for me, there was one in Christleton, which meant I could continue to live at home.
That's easy.
And move over, and a great mate of mine from school and I used to car share.
Nice.
And he's now the senior partner of a criminal practice in Liverpool. Still a mate of mine. And I hated it because it was learning by rote. I mean, you've been at university, you've been encouraged to think, you've been encouraged to manage your time, and you've been encouraged to sort of, basically do what you want as long as you get where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And suddenly we had to be in there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we had lecture after lecture, and it was so flipping dull. And I did have second thoughts at that point, but it's what you have to go through to get the basic knowledge under your belt. And thankfully for me, it was only 12 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be a lot shorter now because they truncate.
I was going to say, is it? I think now it might be 9.
It's changed a lot since my day. I mean, I would not with any confidence at all comment on the process now because there's so many different ways of doing things, and the whole process has changed.
Yeah.
And indeed, my son went through it 10 or 11 years ago, and it's changed again since he did it.
Yeah.
But when I did it, it really was back to the classroom, cramming it all in, making sure you passed. I failed a couple the first time, I had to resit a couple of things, which was not unusual. These days, one thing that is different is that a lot of firms pull the plug on you if you fail.
Yeah,
that's true. The current process, and which I think is incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily do that at all, but there are firms that do that because demand for places is so high.
Yeah.
When I did it, you could get away with failing 2, I think, without having to resit everything.
Yeah.
And I can't remember whether it was conveyancing or property. I can't remember what it was, but I failed 2. I got them the second time.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop me starting my training my articles of clerkship. Wasn't a training contract in those days.
Yeah. I think the SQE is relatively this is the newest iteration.
Yeah.
It's relatively new, and I think there's been a bit of teething problems with people adapting to the new exams. So I think the pass rate is.
Well, I think there's been a bit of teething problems by those who've been setting the exams as well. But I've still got a practicing certificate, so I bet I didn't go too far down that road.
No comment. So so you passed after a couple of tries. Passed the.
Thanks for putting it like that. But carry on. Yeah.
Passed the law school exams.
Yeah.
Joined Hill Dickinson.
Yeah.
Which office did you train in?
Well, there were only two choices, and it was Liverpool or London. That's all we had in those days.
No Manchester?
No Manchester. Manchester came in, we were talking about this last night, the 2nd of April 1997. Manchester came on the scene. Okay. So I went into Liverpool. I think at the time there were 8 partners in Liverpool.
Yeah.
If there was a head count of anything more than 40, I'd be surprised. In offices in Castle Street, Equity and Law House. Was articled. I must remember to keep calling it articled. That's changed. Articled to a pensions lawyer. And
how was that experience?
Incredibly dull. I mean, great bloke, nice fella to work for, but pensions law was never going to be for me.
Yeah.
But you've got to start somewhere. Fortunately, I was. You move around during articles, even in the way we did it in my day, and I moved into the marine environment, shipping and transport, and found that was my niche. That I really enjoyed doing that. And fortunately was able to qualify into that space some 2 years later. But did a lot of other things, because in a firm with 9 partners in those days,
you get a bit of everything.
I became expert at driving pleas in mitigation in the magistrates' court and a few other things that I wouldn't even dream of contemplating doing now. But that was just the way it was. But the main staple of what I was sort of training and learning to do was in the marine environment as a contentious lawyer.
Yeah. So what was life like? Relatively small office in Liverpool. What was the law firm culture like? Was it in at 8, leave at 8? I mean, what was the day to day?
It was nothing like what it is today. It was much more formal.
Yeah.
Hierarchical. That's not to say that today there isn't a structure, but it's more of an invested, engaged culture than it then was.
Yeah.
The time obligations were a bit more 9 to 5. I think with us, it may not have been elsewhere, but at Hill Dickinson it was in Liverpool. It wasn't very dynamic, if the truth be known. And looking back on it, it's difficult to see how we made any money, because it wasn't run as a business. I assume we did, but or certainly I got paid. So £3,500 was my first annual salary. Good Lord! But it didn't. Looking at it now and what the way that law firms are now run, it wasn't really run as a business. If the truth be known, there was a lot of good faith between the partners, but there didn't appear to be too great a strategy. It was just a vehicle whereby people practiced law.
Yeah.
And maybe there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at the time. It survived. Clearly it provided a living for many people. But it's very different to what it is now.
Yeah.
Incredibly different.
Yeah, I do want to get into that BD strategy for partners later. I don't think we should touch on that now, but I think that's a very interesting piece. Yeah, so when in those early days then, when you were working as a pensions lawyer, whoever else it may be, what was the mentoring like? I mean, what was the training like in those days?
I think it differed between the partner you were working for. And with some you got, sink or swim.
Yeah.
There it is, get on with it. Come back and tell me how you got on, sort of thing.
Do you think that's a good way?
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I think you have to caveat it with it needs a bit more than just go away and get it done type attitude. Actually, when I think back, I might have been a bit frustrated with it at the time, but a couple of partners in particular were very good at, and I mean, I'm not saying this ironically, very good at helping you see where you've gone wrong.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of that, go away and have a go, but then come back and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And, the red pen was out, but that I actually think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
If done in the right way. And there was a shipping partner at the time there called John Maxwell, who wasn't one of my principals, but I worked for him from now and again. And he was a real pedant. In a positive way, in the sense that he was a perfectionist, and whilst that definitely frustrated me at the time, there's no doubt about it. He was standing by his desk while he ripped whatever you'd done apart.
Yeah.
But he told you why.
Yeah.
And you learned from it. And I think that was an incredibly positive thing. And the guy I ended up working for most of my time, once I'd qualified, or a lot of the time, it was a great mentor to me, David Waring. He was very similar, in a bit more friendly red pen way than John was. But again, it was, look, you've done this. I get it why you've done it, but did you think about, and that was, more of a collaborative approach to it.
Yeah.
But either way, I think I got good technical training from both of them. Another guy who I did work for, who sadly passed away, Martin Hill, was very much a case of, there's the file.
Crack on,
lad. Good luck. Do let me know how you get on. And as I say, there's not necessarily things wrong with that, providing you felt comfortable at some point saying, I can't do this. I don't understand what I do next. And if that is the attitude that is being given to you, or the attitude taken by the teacher, in that sense, I think you've got to also have that safety net.
Yeah.
Being able to go back and say, please, I don't get this.
Yeah.
What do I do next? Without that, it can be a bit dangerous. Yeah. Times haven't really changed in that sense, I don't think, because I still think there's a combination of those methods is still the way to teach today.
Yeah.
And there's a partner in our London corporate team who... a fantastic partner, great practice, real character, great at team building and what have you. And his method is, once his associates or his paralegals, whatever it is, have got to a stage where he trusts them enough to get on with things by themselves, he lets them get on with it. And he doesn't interfere unless they're going to, really sort of kill the client or the world's going to explode. As long as the job gets done, the deal gets done, let them get on. Keeps an eye on it, but we'll let them run. At the end of the deal, once it's done and everybody's survived and the business, the IPO's happened or whatever the deal has been completed, he'll sit down and say, okay, you got away with it, but I would have done it this way.
Yeah.
And that I think is it's very similar to the good way that I'm talking about 40 years ago. I don't think anything's changed in that sense.
Yeah.
You've got to pass on that knowledge. The trick is how you do it. And recognising at which stage your pupil, let's call it that for this purpose, is in their career. Because in fairness to the guy who would give me the file and say, go away and crack on and let me know how you get on, that was at a stage where, for the vast majority of what he gave me, I could probably do it. Some of it was starting to push me, towards the edge of the comfort zone. But a lot of it I could do. And I don't think, had he perceived that I couldn't do it, he wouldn't have done it. Yeah. He wouldn't have allowed it to happen. And I think that's a positive.
Yeah, it seems like a nice balance.
It was a nice balance. As I say, it frustrated me in some cases at the time. But I think it put me in a position by the time I was 3, 4, 5 year qualified where I was very, very confident to do things by myself.
Yeah.
And start to build a practice that was dependent on me. I don't like the expression "my practice" because at the end of the day, you're in a team, aren't you? You're in a firm.
Yeah. But
we use that, don't we, as a way of describing our client bases and what have you. And I felt confident, certainly by the early 90s, that I could develop a practice.
Yeah.
And that I had the skills that would enable me to impress clients.
Yeah. And look, I think if you don't give feedback and you don't tell people what they've done well and what they've done wrong, if you're just a bit of a yes man and say, yeah, great, well done, people don't learn from that.
No, they don't. No. I don't think it does anybody any good, that approach.
No.
Even now, I've sat on our firm's remuneration committee for years and years, and the chairman and I, it's my last year, I won't be doing it again, fantastic. But the chairman and I read all the appraisals and all the partners, and, without going into detail and naming names, some of them aren't worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah.
Because it is a case of, well, yes, well done. Didn't you have a fantastic year? Must try harder. And that's no good, really. You've got to have, as you say, that feedback loop. And it shouldn't be once a year either. It should be on every job, particularly with a more junior lawyer. It has to be every job, because that's, as you say, that's the way people learn.
So this comes down to top-down culture, really. I mean, if you have culture coming from the leadership or the board that says, give feedback to juniors, and let's say, for example, you have a big biller partner who just doesn't want to get involved and do that. I mean, how do you balance those two priorities of firstly not wanting to lose him, but secondly wanting to develop the team underneath him as well?
Yeah, there is a balance. You're quite right. And education doesn't stop just because you become a partner. So, if there's a partner that's behaving in that way, you've got to educate that partner as well. Now, it may be that they're so far down their own lives and thought processes that they're very difficult for them to change.
Yeah.
And there will be, if they are the big, gorillas in the jungle, people you don't necessarily want to lose, providing all their other behaviours are good and they're not a drain on values and they're not, breaking your culture. But it's a team environment, so if you've got a partner like that is incapable of changing, that's probably okay, providing you've got other partners around the individual, the juniors, who can teach them.
Yeah. And
one of the things we've done is to try and this came out of the pandemic, where, of course, all of the teaching methods in the world went up in the air, on the 25th of March, 2020, or whatever it was. And in many teams, because people were coming in and out of an office when they could, we became quite adept, and I'm sure other firms did, at breaking down that old associate partner team. And if an associate was in, there would be a partner in the team but it might not be the man or woman that they work with every day. But they're there, that senior person, the partner, to help any of the associates who are in that day with anything.
Yeah.
And that sort of approach can break down the negative of having a partner that's not really into giving feedback, or giving feedback in a way that's going to be helpful to the junior.
Yeah.
And that sort of erodes that negativity, I think.
And that was very much my experience. I mean, really straight after COVID, I remember sitting in an office, kind of a bullpen of 200 seats, and being a total of maybe 3 or 4 of us in the office. So you can imagine, as a junior, trying to learn in that environment isn't the easiest.
It's very difficult. I mean, the phrase "learning by osmosis" became a sort of a buzz phrase, didn't it? Because we all appreciated that actually that's how a lot of learning in professional service firms happens.
Yeah.
You sit in a room with an experienced lawyer, accountant, auditor, whatever it may be. You hear them speaking on the phone. You hear the way that they speak with clients, with opposition if it's contentious, or with other parties on a transaction, and you start to soak it up.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, and I certainly found this, you do get to the stage where you think, well, I'm not sure I'd have done it that way. But that comes with experience, because you're listening to it. Well, that went out of the window, didn't it, during the pandemic, because you simply couldn't do it. And Teams and Zoom and all the other mechanisms we use to communicate in those days just don't compensate for that, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Everybody did their best, and we got through it. But there's no substitute at all for that learning by osmosis in the early stages of your career.
And you can't. Again, I think you can't invest in L&D to replace that. As I said, from my experience, I was learning things very much patchwork. So I'd be given a task from one part of a deal, and then another part of a task from another part of the deal, and there was no continuous understanding of an end-to-end deal within that process. And I think that being around other people and being able to say, I've been doing this, I understand how this works, but how does it fit into the bigger picture? I think you can't really teach that with L&D out of a textbook.
No, you can't. And I think you've got to differentiate between the learning by osmosis method and what L&D can definitely provide to the overall education of a junior lawyer. And it's almost like soft and hard skills, isn't it? So L&D is still there to teach you, the black letter law, and make sure you get the right courses to go to ensure that you know what you're talking about technically. because that's still incredibly important. That is never going to change. I know we're going to come on to what may change, but that isn't. Trust me, that is not going to change. And I'd be amazed if I'm wrong, quite frankly, on that. But on the other hand, what you learn by osmosis is more of the softer side of how a deal gets done, how a job gets done, how to deal with a client.
Yeah.
Yes, you can have classroom training on a lot of those stuff, negotiation skills and all that sort of stuff. You can. But you've got to see it in action and see how your mentor does it, how your principal does it, how your mate does it, who's a bit more qualified than you are, and pick up both good and, as I say, bad from that. And L&D doesn't do that because it can't put you in the live situation where you are viewing a real client conversation, a real opponent conversation, for good or bad.
And the written word is very different from the tonality of the spoken word as well.
Absolutely.
So, if you write something down in a workbook, speak to a client like this, you could speak it in the most robotic tone and come across as almost sarcastic with the way you're delivering it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So look, we've been over that. So let's move on. Mm-hmm. It seems like from the history of law firms growing, the competitive advantage is the ability to acquire other firms or acquire talent. And as we mentioned as well, being able to home grow that talent as well. Yeah. I think on the homegrown piece, maybe the benefit is felt a bit further down the line, hopefully by you and not by a competitor. But the immediate growth strategies are buying another law firm or bringing in partners with, hopefully, their portable business. So let's start with acquiring other firms. Just talk me through some of the acquisitions that went on. I'm actually interested or fascinated by the changing of law firms and names over time. I mean, has Hill Dickinson changed that much?
No,
over the years?
It was Hill Dickinson and Co. 40 odd years ago, and it's Hill Dickinson LLP now.
Yeah.
So we haven't actually. We've been the masters and mistresses of our own destiny in that sense. But yes, you're right. We've done a number of, I'll call them transactions, because to call them acquisitions, certainly in the main with us, would be a misnomer, really. They were mergers or large lateral hire, group lateral hirings. But we've done a number, and I was involved in many. So the first one that I completed was actually with Hill Dickinson, and thereby hangs a tale, because Hill Dickinson and Co. split up in 1989. Yeah. The day I was made a partner in Liverpool. The Liverpool and London offices went their separate ways for reasons that we don't need to bother ourselves with. But 17 years later, well, actually, we started talking about 15 years later. They approached us and said, things have changed. Would you be interested? And we weren't to start with, because we'd also changed. Yeah. But in the 2 years that followed that initial approach, it became obvious that we needed to grow in London. And here was a ready-made opportunity with a client base, with people, offices, etc., etc. And also they needed to back into a larger firm because they'd not been, and I'm not defaming anybody when I say they'd not been as successful as they'd hoped. Yeah. And then the guys who were still around from there would agree with me on that. And in that sense, it was a very obvious merger. Putting it together was interesting. But,
so let's go into that.
Yeah, go on then.
As you said, two firms split apart.
Yeah.
The cultures change. Again, putting it in a modern context, maybe one has 5 days in the office, one is hybrid, as a very basic example. But things change over time. How do you bring those two differing parties back together again?
Yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head. First of all, there has to be a semblance of common culture. Yeah. Because that's it's buzzword culture these days in professional service firms, but it's so on the nail in terms of what's important. Because if you can't get on, culture is about people getting on and people having a common view of what's good and what's bad. And I firmly believe there's no such thing as good or bad culture. There's just the culture that suits you and me. And if it suits us both, we're all right. But if it doesn't suit us both, then we're not going to get on in business. We might be great down the pub on a Friday night, but we're not going to get on in business. So don't bother. We're all grown up. Don't do it. So that's the first thing you've got to establish. And what we found was that the cultural differences that had split the firm in 1989 had come very, very more closely aligned.
Yeah.
The culture had become more closely aligned. And the people who were the driving forces then were my generation. And we'd had no problem 17 years before, those of us who were around together, we were mates. It was more senior people that found that their cultures weren't aligned.
Yeah.
But our cultures were, and we felt on both sides we could do business here. So that's your starting point. If you haven't got that, forget it. It's not going to work. And we found that we could. And the drivers of that business at the time were much more aligned to the way we wanted to run a business. I say we, the Liverpool office at the time. By then we had a Manchester office as well. But and so that's your first point. Secondly, you've got to work out the numbers. We are running a business here. Culture by itself will not drive profitability. It doesn't half help, and without it, you won't get profitability. But you've got to have other factors in play, and and most importantly, work out where the partners are going to fit into the existing structure without upsetting the apple cart.
Yeah.
And where are they going to come into the equity structure, for example? For how long is that going to be whilst they prove themselves in a new business? There's all sorts of those types of financial, personal issues to bear in mind. Crucial, again, is clients. Are we going to see conflicts if we come together? Because, again, like culture, if that doesn't fit, then, again, there's no point.
Yeah.
Because you're going to lose business, you're going to lose people, and ultimately, therefore, you're going to lose revenue. So you've got to work out that the client bases are compatible. In firms that were operating in the same sector, and of course we were to a very significant extent both operating in the shipping and the transport world, not exclusively, but we were. There are going to be conflicts, so you've got to identify them if you can by doing quite a lot of client due diligence. And working out whether you can live with it or not. Yeah. And be prepared to accept the fact there'll be something there that you hadn't foreseen. And I'll give you an example of that. So there was a very senior partner in Hill Dickinson, Maria Petordis, who was a force of nature. She ended up running our shipping department for many years. Fantastic practice. Sadly died far too early with cancer. A great friend of mine. And she had, I bet I hadn't named the client, but she had a particular client that was very, very important to her practice. And she rang him up. It wasn't a client that had been part of the due diligence exercise because she was absolutely confident there was no problem with this crowd. And she rang them up and said, "Great news, we're getting back together. The band's getting back together. Hill Dickinson, it's going to be great, fantastic." And the client, who again became a great mate of mine, spoiler alert, said, "Maria, that's probably the worst news you could have given me this morning. I've got them on the other side in a case in the whole county court at the moment, and the guy who's doing it is a complete and utter numpty, and it's dreadful. And well, what the hell have you done? I'm going to have to reconsider your position on the panel." So I jumped on the next train to London, obviously, and went to see him and said, "Come on, what's the score?" And it was a guy who we employed at the time who'd gone completely mad on a case, totally getting it wrong. And I said, "Well, look, we'll sort this. Give me a chance. A bad start, but give us a chance."
Yeah, it's not great.
And he said, "Well, I will do because Maria's fantastic. I don't know you from Adam, Pete, but we'll live with it for a while. But you've got to sort this guy out. I'm not having him, behaving like this against me." And we sorted it out without going into the detail. And I went back and said, "Look, you told me to sort it out. I've sorted it out. I haven't let our clients down. We've just dealt with it in a way that everyone's come out of this alive and no problem."
Still friends at the end as well.
And he said, "Yeah, okay, fair enough." And there's still clients today. So that will happen, and you've got to be prepared to react to it. But you probably won't foresee that. But you've got to try and foresee as much as you can to avoid any conflicts. Because if you've got too many conflicts, the thing isn't going to work. So there's probably three of the main ingredients. It's the culture. It's getting the finances aligned in terms of how you're going to reward people in the early stages, and then making sure there's a good reason to do it from a client perspective that isn't going to cause you headaches. I mean, we've had deals subsequently where the culture was great, finances were going to work, but when you looked at the client bases side by side, you thought, why are we doing this? You've got lots of stuff that we've already got.
Yeah.
We've got stuff you don't really want and you can't add to. What am I going to tell, for example, the CEO of a shipping company in Piraeus why I'm merging with you? Because it makes absolutely no difference to them whatsoever. And there's no logic to it. We're never going to make 5 out of 2 plus 2 here. Yeah. We're going to be bigger. It'll be fine. Culture will be great. We can get on with you, no problem. But we're not going to get any better. Yeah. We'll just get bigger. If that's the case, don't do it.
So does that come into consideration then? For example, we talked about conflicts, probably the negative side of new business, but in terms of cross-sell and wins as well, what are the things you look for in new business in terms of not just revenue chasing? Do you chase profit, equity partner? I mean,
you've got to chase profit.
Yeah,
you've got to look at profit. I mean, revenue. Yeah, there are reasons why you may want to just get bigger. Critical mass. Excuse me. You may want to simply provide more services, even though the profitability may not be impacted. Because you're missing a bit of a client's work or whatever. But ultimately, you've got to be reasonably satisfied you're going to enhance the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's not just about return on investment for the shareholders, the partners, but that's a big part of it, of course it is. But it's about an ability to invest back into the business. It's about an ability to ensure that your workforce is properly rewarded. It's about having that ability to ensure that they're being developed, because you've got to buy in L&D and all the things that go with it. So, any acquisition has got to have a reasonable chance of, you'll never know, but a reasonable chance of enhancing the bottom line. And it's the same with a lateral hire. You've got to be reasonably satisfied. You never, ever know what is going to happen in reality. But you've got to do as much due diligence as you can to satisfy yourself that this is worth doing from a profitability point of view. If you get to that stage, if you're happy with culture, you're happy you can fit them into the structure, you're happy the client base is okay, it's going to fit in and what have you, you've still eventually got to work out, is 2 and 2 going to equal 4 point something?
Yeah.
And if it isn't, there has to be a damn good reason why you want to carry on doing it. And they can exist, but they've got to be damn good.
Yeah. And as you say, it's difficult to know all the details before it happens. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. If you're looking to bring in a new partner or looking to bring in additional companies through mergers or acquisitions, whatever they may be, how confident are you that you can bring in X% of their book that they say you can? What's the checks against that?
You can never be 100% confident. The more you know about the client bases and the individuals, in theory, the more confidence you should have. But you can never guarantee. So the factors at play, I suppose, are you can do all the due diligence in the world and you can ask all of their current client base how good they think the partner is. But they're not going to say he's a complete idiot. They're not going to say anything about, well, I'd never use him again or her again, because the partner you're looking at has given you those names as his or her referees. So, yes, you want to hear good news. You don't want to hear that he's a complete idiot, but the chances of you hearing that he is are pretty remote.
Yeah.
So take all of that, do it, because you need to start building a relationship with those people for the future. And occasionally you do get a gem or you spot a cross-sale opportunity that partner might not see. But don't hang your hat on it, because you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Don't necessarily hang your hat on any numbers you're given by the individual, because they don't know.
Yeah.
They can tell you what they have done in the past, if they're being honest. But will that transfer? You don't know.
Yeah, so this is the point I'm coming to. So, a partner can give you a spreadsheet that says, these are my clients I've worked with, these are the dates, these are the numbers I've done.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that legal is an ethical industry, it's very, very looked down upon in every industry, but especially in law, that lawyers would lie. What are the checks against that, if there are any?
Yeah, Well, as I say, you can speak to clients, but take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
But they will give you, if they get it and understand why you're asking the question, most of them do.
Yeah.
They will give you as much information as they feel is appropriate, and that's good. Most lateral hires break their confidentiality agreements with their existing employers, and I say that neutrally because they've got to get to somewhere. Not necessarily in terms of the identity of clients that pay them X sums of money, but in terms of the revenue that their team and they generate. There have been occasions when that's happened in the marketplace recently, and the differential between what was promised and what was delivered was so great that people looked into it and discovered there'd just been outright, untruths. People have been struck off for that. Yeah. So there is a precedent that you can't do this. If you're going to give people numbers, they've got to be credible and real. Doesn't mean they're transferable, but it gives you a sense for future potential. Also, as I say, the more you know about the sector, the game, the individual is playing in, the more likely you'll be able to make an assessment of what it is that they are likely to be able to deliver, given all of the factors in play. So if we've got a shipping partner, we know how much a very good shipping partner can generate in terms of turnover in a particular year because we've got several of them in our stable. Same with corporate partners, in property partners, whatever. So, if a partner comes to us and says X and it's way short of what we believe a partner that they're getting paid in their marketplace is capable of delivering, then we know they're not on paper up to scratch. And the other applies. So if we see somebody who's got millions in the bank, we can assess whether that's realistic because we will know the partner in the sectors that we play in. We'll probably have a good idea of their client base because they'll be competitors to us for that work. And we'll understand the nature of the numbers that are being presented. We might not, think that it's credible, but we'll understand, and be able to compare it to like for like examples in our organisation. So you can do that assessment. Yeah. And we try to get as much information about culture of the individual and values as possible, even down to bluntly asking those sorts of questions and assessing the view. We don't do psychometric testing. Maybe we will in years to come. But certainly when I was CEO, and I know Craig, my successor, takes the same view, by the time any lateral hire got to me, I wasn't interested in the technical ability. It's for others, because I can't challenge that, outside of my own discipline. And after 20 years as a manager, I'm not really sure I could do that, to be honest. I wasn't interested in that. I wasn't interested in the numbers. People have checked those and done them to death. I wasn't interested in the nature of the client base unless something struck me that I thought had been missed in the papers. I was interested in having an hour, a couple of hours, whatever it might be, just to talk to them. Yeah. Get a feel for them as an individual. And I would ask questions like, what are your personal values? I want to know. And, I'm making a note of them because we believe in values. And, if they're incompatible, you're probably best going somewhere else, to be honest. Yeah. And that was all I would be interested in, cultural fit. That's, as I said right at the outset, that's absolutely paramount.
So you spent over 40 years, or have spent over 40 years at Hill Dickinson. Yeah. We've spoken about other partners joining you. Yeah. Was there ever a time when people came to you? I'm sure people approached you. Was there ever a time when people came to you and you thought, "Oh, that seems pretty interesting, actually"? Or did you know early on, this is for me for life?
I very nearly left in 1991
to Hill Taylor.
No, to what was then Allsop Bateson's.
Right.
You talk about changing names of law firms. I don't think it wasn't DLA at that point. I just wondered whether I should cast my net, and I spoke to two guys I knew really well. They were competitors, and I got a job offer. Yeah. And I told Hill Dickinson that I was thinking of leaving, and this was there, and they said no, you're not, and improved my life. And on balance, I thought, well, yeah, I'd rather stay if it comes to that, and I was occasionally, from time to time, chased afterwards. Nobody chases managing partners. So once you put yourself in that role, you're really taking yourself out of the market for a lateral hire elsewhere position. And so you should be, quite frankly. You've got fiduciary duties to your people at that point. You shouldn't be looking at going elsewhere. But before I did, I had a couple of opportunities. But Hill Dickinson worked for me. Yeah. It gave me whatever it was I needed at the time. That worked for me. And I did realise relatively early on as a partner that practicing law probably wasn't a long-term game for me. And one of the guys I've mentioned earlier, my mentors, David Waring, was the managing partner from 1990-something, 7. And I saw what he did and thought, I like this. I also saw, and this is not being arrogant, that I could do it better, because at the stage David did it, he was expected to carry on delivering services to clients and fee earning. And I thought, this is mad. This is unfair on him. He's trying to do 2 jobs here as we're growing. He's trying to grow a business, and at the same time, he's trying to keep a client happy. Yeah. That doesn't work in large-ish law firms. And we were starting to get larger, should I put it that way. And when I took over in 2005, it was made absolutely clear to me, and I signed up, wholeheartedly, that I was now the managing partner, and my practice was going to my number 2, who's managed it fantastically. He's done a far better job than I would have done, which is the aim, I suppose, isn't it, really? And once I'd got that in my mind, there was never going to be anybody other than Hill Dickinson for me, for the reasons I say. I think you either go into the job of leading the firm on the basis it's your firm to lead, and that gives you responsibilities and obligations to the people, or you don't. If you think you might want to move on at some point, then don't do a leadership role like that, because it's unfair.
And you did mention earlier that when you were coming up to the ranks, you'd look at mentors, watch what they're doing, learn from them, and then eventually you'd be thinking, I can do it better, or maybe we should do it in a different way. Yeah. You mentioned that again just now. Do you think that is one of the traits of leadership, of looking at previous experience and what works and what doesn't work, and being critical and suggesting new paths?
Yes. It doesn't necessarily have to be critical. So I'm certainly not saying I'm being critical of the way David ran the business. Far from it. He was very successful. What I am saying is that the process of enabling him to run the business was wrong, because it was taking far too much of his time to deal with clients that, he was kept alive, quite frankly, by a very good senior associate who subsequently made partner. So I'm not being critical, and I think critical is probably the wrong word. But I think what a leader, a prospective leader, has to do is, yes, certainly look at what their predecessor is doing, but also looking at ways of evolving them. So, for example, when I stood down, and there was a long process whereby Craig was accepted and nominated and appointed, we did a joint presentation at our AGM 2 years ago. And I started it off, and then I said, "But you don't really want to hear from me anymore, do you? You might as well get over to him." And we rehearsed it, obviously down to the nth degree. But his message was very much strategically, it's business as usual. We're on a growth model. We'll be looking to bring more people in. We'll be looking to develop our existing people. All the stuff that's got us where we are now and done us so well for the last 8-10 years, or whatever it is, carries on regardless. But I'm not him. And I will do some things differently, and I will change 1 or 2 things. And you may notice them, you may not. But I just think we need to move on a little bit. Yeah. But don't worry, because they're just operational stuff. Strategically, we're going the same way. We're not floating on the stock market. We're not going to take a private equity investment. We're not going to merge with Slaughter and May. We're not going to do any of those things that none of you want us to do. But there will be some things that are evolving and done differently as we go along. And it will be done slowly and gently. It's not revolution, it's evolution. Yeah. And I use the old Kaizen measure of, little steps. just incremental steps, step by step. And I think that is an obligation on a new leader. And that's happened in the last 2 years. There's no doubt about it. And we're just doing a rebrand at the moment where the way we articulate our values will probably evolve. I mean, we haven't agreed it yet with partners, but that is likely to happen, and so it should. And that's something that he spotted and led. Hasn't changed the strategy, hasn't changed anything given the way in which we want to run the business. But there's a particular piece of the operational side of the business that he thinks needs to move on a bit now. Good for him.
Yeah.
I don't feel as if he's saying, you were crap, Pete. Yeah. I think he was saying, well done, I think we need to move it now. Yeah. And I'm totally on side with it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the traps that new leaders fall into. They think, if someone's been in the role for a long time, they've built it up over time, come in and think, right, I need to put my mark on the company now, and end up changing all those things that were so successful. Yeah. But by the sounds of it, that seems like, what was the word you used? That the incremental.
Yeah, I think it's the old Japanese philosophy, isn't it? I think it's Kaizen or something like that.
Yeah.
The other way, when Craig told me that was his approach, I said, so yeah, it's a bit like Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday. The famous speech that you clearly haven't seen the film. Go away. But there's a famous speech in that film where Al Pacino, the coach of it's the Miami Dolphins, and they don't call it the Miami Dolphins. And the film takes him through the challenges of bringing in a new quarterback who's the fourth choice quarterback, and it's Jamie Foxx and whatever. And they get to the playoffs, and they're getting absolutely battered by, I think it's the Arizona Chargers or whatever. And he does the speech in the dressing room, and he said, life's a game of inches, and we scrabble inch by inch. It's little steps, and over those little steps we do this, that, and the other. It's the same principle.
Yeah.
One of the things I did was go and did the Harvard Leading Professional Services course, which was great. 10 days of sort of really intense learning and what have you. But right on the last day, our class tutor said, right, okay, now first thing, before you go back to your law firms is do not go back with a flipboard and start changing the world. On the basis of what you've learned over the last 10 days, because everyone's going to look at you and think, oh, for God's sake, go away.
Yeah.
You've learned, use it, but don't go back and swipe away everything you've done for the last 40 years. No, it's not the way to do it. Changing law firms is difficult. You've got to do it inch by inch. You've got to do it gradually. And I think that's where the new leader should focus. It may be that over 2 or 3 years there's a dramatic step that they think is justified because of what they've seen in those 2 or 3 years. But you can't expect them to come in on day one, I think, and just say, right, we are merging with Slaughter and May, leave it with me, sort of thing. It's not right.
Was that on the cards?
What, merging with Slaughter and May? I kept trying.
Yeah.
No. But it was a sort of standing joke in every AGM speech I ever gave that. There was no big merger that we felt was right.
Yeah.
We'd done a lot. We talked about one, didn't we? We did several smaller acquisitions or mergers that helped us grow to what we are today. And we had 2 or 3 opportunities to do the big merger. One I've sort of alluded to, where the client bases just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
It is common knowledge that we had a number of conversations with INS before they went bust.
Yeah.
And that was a cultural difference that we walked away from. And it manifested itself in operational reasons, which I'm not going to talk about because that was confidential, but it is, it is open knowledge that we had those conversations.
Yep.
And with both of those opportunities, what really struck us was a big merger that ticked the boxes we talked about earlier around culture, financial mutuality, etc., was really difficult for us. And was probably impossible for us at any one moment in time, because we're diverse, because we are really proud of our culture. Every law firm will say they are, and quite rightly so, but we are. And if there are gaps in what we see on the other side, then it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I always said, no, Slaughter and May haven't called. We're not doing that. But that was code for there's no major mergers. So stop asking me who we're merging with or whatever, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Never say never, but it's not going to happen at the moment.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
See what Craig gets up to. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to media and personal branding. I know that obviously we're here filming and talking for a podcast. You run your own podcast as well. I've seen a lot more lawyers engaging with LinkedIn and being active on there. What advice do you have for lawyers who want to build a bit of a personal brand or develop their reputation online?
Okay. I would say online, your last word there, comes a little bit down the line of establishing the brand as a lawyer.
Yeah.
If you want to be an influencer, be my guest. There's
Yeah.
various routes to go and do that. If you want to, try and get yourself into the media and the arts and whatever, absolutely fine. Use social media from day one. Clues in the title, you're a lawyer. Your personal brand really still depends on your ability to practice law.
Yeah.
And that's about develop an ability, to know your stuff, as I put it earlier, the black letter law that I do not think is going to change.
Yeah.
Any lawyer, whatever sphere they're in, has got to know something about their speciality and be able to be credible to clients. Even if it's, I don't know as much as I should do, but I know a man who does, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's got to happen. And it's also about that ability to attract clients. Because you're not, I'm sorry, even today, you're not going to attract clients simply on the basis of a LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might get interest and you might get an opportunity to talk to prospective clients on the back of something you've written or posted. But they've still got to buy the service. And that's about then how you can establish a relationship with them.
Yeah.
So knowing your stuff and that ability to relate to people come first, I think. Once you're reasonably confident about that, then LinkedIn is a very valuable tool that you can use in terms of getting messages across, getting your details of your ability across, details of your knowledge across, and by all means use it. But don't start there. There's a very good example I can give you of one of the leading legal voices on LinkedIn is a guy called William Peake. You follow LinkedIn, you may have come across him, managing partner of Hanley's or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he posts 10 times a day. And, some of it's a bit ad hoc. I was in the airport and I thought of this.
Yeah.
Some of it is very, very targeted advice for junior lawyers, advice for partners, whatever it may be. And he's very good at it. And he's got thousands of followers, including me, and I really, really respect what he does. He's got a personal brand. He's been a lawyer for 20-odd years.
Yeah.
He's the managing partner of an offshore law firm. And I've seen him interviewed as to what, and asked the question, you've already got a personal brand. Why do you go on LinkedIn 10 times a day? He said, well, I'm now using my personal brand to establish the firm brand. Yeah. This is all about the law firm. This is not about me anymore. I'm just the mouthpiece. I could stop tomorrow if I felt the brand of the law firm was absolutely where I want it to be. So this is all about me trying to be as clever as I can and get messages across in the way that I do, in a nice, humorous, sometimes way, to raise the profile of my law firm in the way that I think I want it raised.
Yeah.
This is not about me. I've got my personal brand. I've got a practice. I can, I don't need to do this, but I do it for that other purpose. I think that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Get your personal brand on its way. Might not be complete, but on its way through learning how to do the job, learn how to deal with people, start to attract clients. By then, by all means, blast on social media if that's your forte.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, a picture tells 1,000 words, as they say. And video tells 1,000 more, because that's the way people now like to see social media, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I learned that lesson. Just words are great.
How did you start off with big articles?
Oh gosh, no
analysis.
Photograph. Tap on the door from the business development team. How about a photograph? Have you ever thought of doing a video? And they're absolutely spot on. Of course they are, because that is how now people want to absorb their social media exposure.
Yeah.
And that then leads you to have to learn skills that they don't teach you at law school.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Well, maybe they will in the future.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I speak to a lot of future trainees. We had our first future trainee social on Wednesday this week.
Yeah, right.
A lot of law firms are now asking them, when they go to VAC schemes or open days, to film like a TikTok, a day in the life.
Yeah.
Hi, I've come to X law firm. This is what it looks like. I appreciate that lawyers are still lawyers at the end of the day, but law is a business, and for a business to operate, you have to sell.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
I know you mentioned there that you have to build up credibility as a lawyer first, but do you think there's any value in junior lawyers maybe posting videos or even just describing what their days look like for client outreach?
Yeah, I do, but I don't think that's necessarily going to build their personal brand as a lawyer. What it will do is build two things. It will teach them the skills, or start to teach them the skills as to how they will do that.
Yeah.
When they are, satisfied they're at the stage where they can build their personal brand as a lawyer, as opposed to a young, ambitious, hungry individual who's starting out on what might be a long road.
Yeah.
And secondly, it'll make them feel more comfortable in that environment, because and I've seen it with people in our own business at a much later stage where they do it for the first time, and you think, good God, we can't let that in front of a client.
Yeah.
The text is fine, and I'm sure it's all right.
Yeah.
But the manner of delivery isn't what a client is going to want to see. And so I do think there is merit in more junior potential lawyers and qualified lawyers starting to practice those skills. But I don't think that's about building a personal brand at that point. I think it's about feeling comfortable. I think it's about learning the pitfalls, because there are pitfalls in doing that sort of thing. And I would encourage people to do it. It is actually, I know you've mentioned my podcast, it's our podcast, it's very much the Hill Dickinson podcast. And I do it with a co-host who is more junior lawyer, sometimes a partner, sometimes not. And one of the aims of the podcast, there were a number, but one of the aims was to give those individuals exposure to it and make them feel more comfortable in an environment where they're having a conversation not about the law, 99 times out of 100, because it's pretty dull, but having a real life communication with could be a client, could be a celebrity, whoever it is. We've been very fortunate to be able to use our network to get some pretty good guests. And get them feeling comfortable with a microphone in front of the face and a camera on them. Yeah. Not live, so they're not, going to be dumped into something they regret for the rest of their lives. But they are sort of thrown in the deep end. And we don't train them how to do it. They listen and they come along and we have a chat beforehand and they do it and they have a go. And we can edit it and we can add bits and we stop and start occasionally. But part of the reason to do it was to expose more of our own people to that type of environment. Because I agree with you, I think at some point, if not now, delivery of legal services is going to be delivered in that way. Well, it is now, quite frankly, not exclusively, but it is. And lawyers have got to be not necessarily adept, but certainly comfortable in doing that.
You mentioned there that you bring young lawyers onto the Hill Dickinson podcast. You're helping them with soft skills, getting them in front of clients, having non-technical conversations. How else can leaders, partners, whoever it may be, mentor younger lawyers to have those conversations, and not necessarily on camera or on a podcast, but those non-technical soft skills conversations? How can you mentor younger lawyers?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, actually. Some of it comes naturally, both ways. So we see young lawyers who have a natural bent for networking, for building relationships with other human beings, and we see people who are completely lost in that environment. Yeah. For whatever reason, and that's not a criticism of it, it's just not for them. We also see a difference, I think, between someone who can hold their own in a room of 100 people and talk to 98 of them, and someone who is adept at a conversation like this one-to-one, but would hate the idea of having to sort of walk into a room where they didn't know anybody and have to actually start a conversation.
Yeah.
And you can provide training around all of that, and there are professional trainers who do that, and indeed we have people in our own L&D team who will help with that. And there is a bit you can learn. You can learn the process of, going to a party like that and going up to someone and saying, hello, who are you, sort of thing, in the nicest possible way, and developing a conversation. But you can't necessarily teach the flair for that.
Yeah.
Because it is a bit of a natural character trait. And we see it with younger lawyers who are, just as I say, adept. They love doing that.
Yeah.
They're totally at home going and talking to people they've never met about subjects they know absolutely nothing about and getting away with it.
Yeah.
But we see the other side of the coin, and my successor Craig tells a lovely story when he was practicing. He's a private equity corporate lawyer, and they were doing a deal, and he had a trainee with him, and he said to the trainee, "Go away and have a word with your opposite number. We don't like clause 13." Half an hour later, she came back with a draft email. What's this? She said, "Well, you told me to go and tell them we didn't like clause 13. He said, "I told you to pick that thing up called the telephone and have a word with your opposite number and say, we don't like clause 13. Can we bin it? I don't want a 2-page email explaining why we don't like it." And she said, "Oh, I hadn't appreciated it."
Yeah.
And it was more about the fact that she was totally uncomfortable in the spoken word arena. Now, you can help with that by professional training, but she's got a bit of an issue about doing that, clearly, on the back of this. And that's okay, as long as you know that and you're aware of it, and you can develop your career accordingly.
Yeah.
But it is a bit of a natural thing you're starting with, I think.
And if people struggle, I guess, in the kindest ways, like ripping a bandage off, you can force people to do it, I guess, at the start. And after a while, it gets easier and easier.
Yeah, you can. But there are some that it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
There was one guy who I rate really highly in our firm. He is a partner, and he's tipped for the top. And I wanted him on one of the podcasts in this particular city. And he just said, "You must be joking. I can't do that." Now, this is a really, really accomplished guy. He was very senior. In reality, as I say, he's got it. He's going places. He's already in places with us. Yeah. But the thought of this just absolutely killed him. Yeah, I can't do it. Okay, no big deal, no problem, because I know you're so good at other things. It doesn't matter. And I think that's it. If that lady in question who clearly had a difficulty with conversations as such, recognises that, but ensures that actually she's really good lawyer, black letter law lawyer. She's excellent in maintaining a relationship once she knows somebody.
Just that first step.
The first step's difficult for her, absolutely fine. Don't send her to the party with 100 people.
Yeah.
Send her out for dinner one-to-one with the GC of the client, and she'd probably be fine.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to. It's an assessment point. Can do a lot of learning about it, but sometimes you just have to face reality and say it's not going to work for them. But there are other ways that they can develop their career.
Yeah.
What I think what the change is that the media exposure of lawyers has enhanced significantly and will get more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that example, she's going to have to work bloody hard at the one-on-one conversations with people she's comfortable with. And, if she's not comfortable with the spoken word, she ain't going to be pretty good in front of a camera.
Yeah. Fine.
We know that's not for her, but she is going to have to develop other skills to make sure that she can go as far as she wants to go. Yeah.
And look, as long as you're confident with clients, I guess to a certain extent, that's the important thing. So look, we've had a good conversation today. Yeah. So just to summarise and round off. So you took over the reins in 2005.
Yep.
Revenue is at 34 million.
34 million.
34 million. And back in April 2024, you stepped down at 142 141.2 million.
141.2.
141.2 million. Yeah. I gave you an extra million.
It's all right, but I won the sweep that year on the number, so I'll be honest about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say over that period, that's a pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Pretty impressive journey.
Yeah.
What do you think was the key factors in that success?
A number of factors. Teamwork. I had a great team. The team that I had around me when I stood down was the best team I've ever worked in. That's not to say there weren't other individuals along that journey who were great at what they did, but as a combination, that my executive team in 2024, great, worked really well.
Yeah.
By that stage, I'd worked out that really I was the conductor of the orchestra, and I was very comfortable letting the individuals fly. You know, back to my story earlier about the corporate lawyer who won't intervene until, unless the word's about to end. I think that's the right approach.
Sure.
And I was very, very comfortable with that team, letting them get on with life. Mentoring them, coaching them, yes, by all means, speaking to them every day, whatever it may be, but letting them do their jobs because they were better at those jobs than I was ever going to be. So I think that teamwork's the first thing.
Sure.
I think we developed a culture of success over years. Now, it's only in the latter stages of my reign, I think the second half, the last 10 years that we did that. And we really built a culture and values that we were proud of. And we ran the business according to the values. And I think that was very important. And we stuck to it. And we turned down potential lateral hires. We did get rid of a few people because they didn't live up to it.
Yeah.
And we took a pretty highbrow approach to that. And I think that helped. Definitely. Degree of realism, we realised in 2016 that our insurance business could no longer flourish within it, and we sold it. We got rid of it in a way that everybody was happy, even those who left, because they saw the writing was on the wall. And that enabled us, that took 25 million off our turnover at the time. And Kat Griffiths, the lawyer, described me as the brave managing partner. What she meant was, you're mad. But we've discussed it previously, and she sees where I was coming from now. But seriously, we knew we had to downsize to grow. Yeah. And that's realism. We were prepared to accept that. And it gave us a platform to fly, no doubt about it. And ultimately, having said all of those three things, and it sounds twee, and you'll hear it from everybody in the professional service area. It's all about the people.
Yeah.
If you've got good people and you develop them and you treat them fairly and you reward them well, not necessarily super highly, but well, then you've got the ingredients to go places. And we've had fantastic people. And we've focused on developing our own and only bringing in those people who live to our values.
Yeah.
And I think you put that cocktail together and it's been very successful.
Yeah, well, it's clearly worked.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Absolutely. So as a final question then, let's say you could turn back time, go back to yourself as a trainee up in Liverpool. From everything you've learned over the past 42, 43-ish years, what piece of advice do you think you personally, not other trainees, you personally would benefit from that time?
I think and it is a trait that's got worse in my view over the 40-odd years. I think I specialised too narrowly. And that's not to say if I was doing it again, I wouldn't be a shipping lawyer because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I think you need to be a bit more rounded. And I don't think I was as rounded as a lawyer as I needed to be. I was too shipping and transport related and contentious law related. And I think given where I went in law into management, a bit of a broader knowledge of other disciplines would have helped me. I've got through, it hasn't been a problem.
Yeah.
But if I were advising me again, I would do that. I think the other advice I would give, it wouldn't necessarily be in 1983, but it certainly would have been in 2010, would have been to get out more. And by that, I mean, I think I should have started to look for an NED position, a trustee position outside Hill Dickinson at an earlier stage than I did. And I'm comfortable with that in the sense that I took the view that I had a big job and my responsibilities were to my people. Yeah. And that was a full-time job and I need to do it full-time.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it now as I'm going into another phase of my career. I think I'm a little bit hampered by not having that on my CV and not having that experience.
Yeah.
Because I only did that relatively recently.
So that's quite a nice. I mean, quite a nice segue. I mean, what is next for you? I mean, what's the?
Well, at the moment, I'm an NED with Hill Dickinson.
Yeah.
And it's what we call NED Plus, because I do a number of executive roles that the CEO doesn't fancy, basically, or weren't on the top of his agenda.
Yeah.
Do a lot of risk management stuff now, complaints, claims, that sort of stuff. That will end on the 30th of April 2026.
Sure.
Because I hit a magic age that is identified in our partners' agreement, which I'm not going to tell you, but you can work it out for yourself. And that is it. You know, we accept that, and I certainly accept that. It would be hypocrisy of me to try and suggest otherwise, having managed people out over the years at that age. That said, we are in discussion for me to remain on our board as an NED and to carry one or two of the functions that I do now, particularly as our complaints director and what have you. In addition to that, I'm currently advising a small private equity consultancy that's set up recently with a guy who I've mentored over the years externally, because I've done some external mentoring in the latter stages of my career. And he and a great friend of mine, who's a former managing partner, advising businesses on potential private equity investment in law firms, and I'm advising them, not the private equity people, but them as a consultancy, helping them where necessary. I'm in discussions with a smaller boutique law firm about doing some advisory work for them as well, because I don't think there's a conflict there with being an NED at Hill Dickinson. I've recently applied to be an head of a sporting organisation close to my heart, which I bet I hadn't mentioned in case I don't get it, because I look all right. But we'll see.
We need you at Wednesday.
Well, I haven't applied for that. I'll give you a clue on that one. But I have, and we'll see whether that goes anywhere. If all of that comes off, that's okay. I'm also going to carry on mentoring externally and probably internally as well, some of the Hill Dicks people, if needs be. And then if anything else comes along, I'm going to have a look at it. I'm not retiring. I'm
open to new opportunities.
Open to new opportunities, definitely. I'm game to go for a bit. As long as I get time with the grandkids, that's okay. And football, and cricket, and I'm fine.
I know you just got back from a holiday as well.
Yes.
You a golfer at all or not?
No, I'm not a golfer. I was mentored by one of our partners who is an incredibly good golfer. And he said, whatever you do, don't go to the driving range first. Go and have some lessons. Yeah. And I thought, well, no, sod that. I'll go to the driving range. Right. And it reminded me how frustrating golf can be. Because I haven't played for 20 years. I used to play. But it was one of the things that I gave up when I became managing partner, because time just wasn't available. Yeah. And an hour at the golf range just made me remember how dreadfully frustrating it is.
I get worse every year.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to do every year. I'm going to steer clear of that, I think. So it won't be golf. Might be paddle. I'm very interested in taking up paddle. But it won't be golf.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for your time today.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me, and have had a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. How do you see the next decade of the legal industry unfolding?
It's going to be very exciting. I think you're going to see the greater involvement of AI, whatever that might mean for individual law firms. I think if that really does take off, you're going to see a change in the nature of how lawyers behave and what it takes to be a great lawyer. And I think you're going to see possible changes to the structure of law firms if the private equity craze that is currently going on actually comes to fruition.
Yeah. Excellent. What 3 skills do you believe lawyers now need to thrive within a modern law firm?
Knowledge of the law sounds obvious, but definitely knowledge of the law. Ability to make relationships with people, and an understanding of how technology, particularly AI, can actually help them deliver services to clients.
With the introduction of AI, the billable hour model seems to be under threat. Do you think that firms will move to a fixed fee model in the future?
No. The billable hour has been under threat for 43 years, in my experience. And whatever some progressive GCs may say and progressive law firm observers may say, I think it will remain because it still remains the staple way in which contentious issues billing are calculated. It's calculated. It also forms the root of how law firms calculate their profitability requirements for fixed fees. Because even with fixed fees, you work out how long it's going to take you and how much you really want to charge per hour to make sure there's a turn in it, either as gross margin or ultimately as net margin. So that billable hour, whilst it might not be as visible in terms of the role it plays with the client, I think that's going nowhere, regardless of the advent of AI.
Excellent.